enter here.
I was going home from work one evening, and it was just an ordinary day. I work a 9 to 5 office job, so I left work at my usual time. It was around 5:15 p.m. when I got in my car and started to drive back. My commute is pretty standard, about a 30-minute drive along some busy roads and highways. As I was driving, I hit a little bit of traffic, as usual, nothing out of the ordinary. About halfway through my drive, I started feeling this weird sensation, almost like deja vu, but stronger. It was like I had done this exact drive at this exact moment before. I remember glancing at the clock and seeing it was 5:45 p.m. The strange feeling didn't go away, and in fact, it started to get stronger. I tried shaking it off, thinking maybe I was just tired or stressed out. But then, things really started to get bizarre. The traffic around me began to thin out way quicker than it should have. And before I knew it, I was the only car on the road. That never happens around that time of day. I decided to take a slight detour through a side street, hoping to avoid a possible accident or something that had caused the sudden drop in traffic. As I turned onto the side street, it felt like everything around me shifted. The light, the air, the sounds, they all changed. It was subtle but noticeable. When I got back on the main road, I glanced at the clock again, fully expecting it to be around 6 p.m, given the detour and light traffic. But the clock read 5:30 p.m. I was sure it was 5:45 p.m. when I first looked at it, and I'd been driving for a while since then. I chalked it up to my clock being messed up and continued driving. But when I pulled into my driveway, it was 5:45 p.m. again. Now I was really freaked out. I checked my watch, my phone, and even the clock inside my house. They all confirmed it was indeed 5:45 p.m. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe I misread the time earlier or something like that, but it didn't add up. I remember seeing the clock at 5:45 p.m. when I was still halfway home in heavy traffic, yet somehow I managed to complete the rest of my drive, including a detour, and still arrive home at that exact same time. I told my wife about it, and she laughed it off, saying I probably just misread the time, even joking that I was never good at reading the time in the first place. But I know what I saw. The weird deja vu feeling, the sudden absence of traffic, the time on my clock. It all felt too real to just be a mistake. Since then, I haven't experienced anything like it, but every time I drive that route home, I get a little on edge, half expecting something similar to happen again. I've read about time slips and glitches, and this feels like one of them, but I still can't wrap my head around it. This started about 2 years ago. I was driving home from work one evening when I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. It only lasted a moment, but when it passed, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the world seemed slightly different. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just tired. When I got home, I noticed a few small changes. My kitchen table had a different tablecloth, a pattern I didn't recall buying. My cat, Henry, who normally greeted me at the door, didn't come running. Instead, he was calmly sitting on the couch, giving me a look like he didn't recognize me. I told myself I was imagining things, but over the next few weeks, more little differences kept cropping up. My favorite coffee shop had a new menu item I was sure wasn't there before. My next door neighbor, whom I'd known for years, introduced himself to me like we'd never met. I began to suspect that something was seriously wrong, but I didn't want to sound crazy, so I kept it to myself. Then it happened again. I was at the grocery store when I felt that wave of dizziness, and the world seemed to shimmer around me. I steadied myself against a shelf, and when the feeling passed, I noticed everything looked slightly different once more. The layout of the store had changed. An aisle that previously had snacks on it now had cleaning supplies. Panicked, I rushed home. This time, it was more than just small changes. My car, which had a dent from a fender bender months ago, was suddenly in pristine condition. My apartment had a different couch, and some of my clothes were missing, replaced by others I didn't recognize. To top it all off, my bank account showed transactions I hadn't made. I started keeping a journal of all the changes. Every time I felt that dizziness and the world shifted, I'd note down the differences. It happened several more times over the following months. Sometimes the changes were minor, like a new brand of toothpaste in my bathroom. Other times, they were more significant, like co-workers having different roles or even different names. The worst part is, I'm no longer certain if the world I'm in now is my original one. The differences are all subtle but definite. My best friend suddenly had a sibling that they never had before. My favorite restaurant closed down, even though I distinctly remember dining there just a week ago in another version of my life. The feeling of disorientation is constant. I've tried talking to people about it, but they either don't believe me or think I'm losing my mind. I can't blame them. If someone told me this, I'd probably think the same. I've stopped trying to figure out why this is happening because it's driving me insane. Instead, I'm just trying to adapt to each new shift as best I can. But it's been exhausting, always looking for the next subtle difference, wondering if today is the day I shift again and what new changes will come with it. I really have no idea how to cope with this. I've been debating whether to post this for a while, because it sounds completely insane. But after reading and listening to glitch stories, I figured it was time to share. This happened to me last year, and I still can't make sense of it. I'm an amateur photographer, and I love taking pictures of nature. There's a state park about an hour's drive from where I live, and I often go there on weekends to relax and snap some shots. This particular weekend was no different. I packed my camera gear and headed out early in the morning. The drive was uneventful, and I arrived at the park just as the sun was starting to rise. The light was perfect, casting a beautiful golden glow over everything. I found a trail that I hadn't explored much before, and decided to follow it to see what new perspectives it might offer. About an hour into my hike, I found this amazing spot. A small clearing with a picturesque view of the forest and a distant lake. I spent a good amount of time there, taking what felt like some of the best photos I'd ever captured. I was really excited about how they were turning out. After a couple of hours, I decided to head back. I was eager to get home and upload the photos to my computer to see them on a bigger scale. When I got home, I immediately connected my camera to my laptop and started the upload process. That's when things started getting weird. As the photos were uploading, I noticed something strange. Mixed in with the new photos were some old ones. Photos I knew I had deleted months ago. They were from an entirely different trip I took to the same park in the winter. I was sure I cleared my memory card before heading out, as I always do to avoid running out of space. Baffled, I checked the timestamps on the photos. The new ones were correctly dated as from that morning, but the old ones had timestamps from only just recently. It didn't make any sense. I thought maybe there was some glitch with the memory card, so I formatted it again and set it aside. The next weekend I went out to the park again. Different trail this time, different setup. I took a bunch of new photos, confident I had fixed whatever the issue was. But when I got home and uploaded them, the same thing happened. Mixed in with the new photos were more from that winter trip, ones I was certain I deleted. This went on for weeks. Every time I uploaded new photos, the old ones would reappear, even after switching to a different memory card. The mysteriously reappearing photos persisted. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I even took my camera to a professional to see if there was some technical issue, but they found nothing wrong with it. It was driving me crazy. Why were these photos haunting my new ones? To add to the mystery, I noticed that the old photos were slightly different each time they reappeared. Small details would change. A tree that wasn't there before, a different arrangement of clouds, a shift in the light. It was as if they were snapshots from slightly alternate versions of my past visits. I finally decided to stop going to that park for a while. I've taken pictures in other locations and thankfully, the glitch hasn't followed me there. But I can't shake the feeling that something was off. Like a ripple in time or a parallel reality bleeding into mine. I've stopped trying to figure it out and just chalk it up to a glitch in the matrix. But I'm curious, are there any other photographers out there who have had things like this happen to them? If so, let me know. So I've been sitting on this for a while, but I feel like I need to share it. It's been bugging me for years now. Maybe someone listening has experienced something similar or can offer some kind of explanation. Here goes nothing. This happened 6 years ago, when I was around 30. I was on a cross-country road trip to visit my family. I've made this trip quite a few times, usually powering through the 15-hour drive in one go. This time, I left at 3:30 p.m. A little later than I would have liked to, but I planned to get to my parents' place around 6:30 to 7 a.m. My dad's retired now and an early riser, so I knew he'd be up, and I planned to sleep until lunchtime when I got there. Everything was going smoothly until around the 6-hour mark. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I felt my eyes getting heavy. I started slipping into micro-sleeps, those brief moments where you literally nod off for a second with your eyes wide open, only to be startled awake suddenly. It was scary. I decided after this happened 2 or 3 times that it would be safer to find a place to stay for the night. So I aimed for the next town which I could see on the horizon. I've driven this route many times, but I've never really noticed this town before. I figured it must be one of those blink and you miss it type places. When I pulled in, the town seemed almost deserted. It was late, sure, but it felt eerie. Nearly all the businesses were closed, and I didn't see a single person around. I managed to find a motel and went inside. The staff greeted me, but they seemed kind of off, distant and not very welcoming. The room they gave me was even weirder. Some of the amenities looked more decorative than functional. There were no power sockets to charge my phone, and the TV wouldn't turn on. I couldn't even find a switch. The bed was hard and uncomfortable, like whoever designed it had never slept on a bed before. Feeling uneasy but exhausted, I decided to sleep. I figured my mind must just be overtired and I'd work it all out in the morning. During the night, I woke up a few times because of strange, unsettling sounds. Kind of like metallic groans and other noises I couldn't quite place. The creepiest thing about them was I couldn't really work out what they were or where they could be possibly coming from. I'd never heard anything like them before in my life. It was creepy, but due to my exhaustion, I eventually drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I went to check out, but the reception area was empty. It looked like it hadn't been occupied for a while. No one was around, so after waiting for a while, I just left the keys on the desk and headed out. As I drove through the town, it struck me how abandoned everything looked. There were no signs of the streets or businesses, and most places looked like they'd been empty for years. I thought I saw people out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. I even thought I saw a car driving in a distant street, only to find nothing when I turned to look. I eventually reached my parents' house and told them about my strange experience. They looked at me like I was crazy and said there was never any town where I described. That really freaked me out. On my way back, I set out to find the town again. I wanted to take photos to prove to them and myself that I wasn't going nuts. But when I got to the place where the town should have been, there was nothing there. Just a long abandoned building and a field on the outskirts of where I remembered the town being. I stopped at a gas station in the next town, refueled and asked the attendant about the town. They said there was no town in that area, nor had there ever been one. I don't know what happened that night. It felt real. It was real. But according to everyone else, it wasn't. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Was it a glitch in reality or something? Or did I slip into a parallel universe or something like that? I just can't shake this. This happened about a year ago, and it's something I still have trouble wrapping my head around. Here's my experience with what I can only describe as a parallel universe. My name is Alex, and I work as an IT specialist in a mid-sized company. Life was pretty routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. It was a comfortable, if somewhat monotonous existence. That is, until one peculiar Saturday morning. I woke up on my bed, but something felt off right away. The light streaming through the window seemed different, almost warmer and softer. I brushed it off as my imagination and went about my morning routine. When I walked into the kitchen, I was immediately struck by something odd. There was a blue mug sitting on the counter. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I'd never owned a blue mug in my life. All my mugs were white. I distinctly remember this because I like the uniformity. A little confused, I picked up the mug and chalked it up to a lapse in memory. Maybe I bought it on a whim and forgot about it, or maybe it was a gift from a long time ago. But things gradually got stranger. As I started making breakfast, I noticed more inconsistencies. The fridge had brands of food that I never bought. And when I checked my phone, it showed 3 unread messages from a person named Mark, who I didn't know. Trying not to freak out, I decided I must have been dreaming. But everything felt so real. The textures, the smells, the sounds. It was too vivid for a dream. I sat down and browsed through my phone. And the more I looked, the more unsettling it got. My social media accounts had photos with friends I didn't recognize. There were pictures of me at events I'd never been to, with people I'd never met. I started to panic and decided to call my best friend, Sarah. But when I went through my contacts, her number wasn't there. Instead, I found another Sarah with a different last name. Desperate, I called her, and to my relief, she answered. "Hey Alex, what's up?" she said, sounding cheerful. "Sarah, something really weird is going on. Do you know who I am?" She laughed. "Of course I know who you are. We went to college together. Are you okay?" It was then I realized I had slipped into some version of my life that felt both familiar and foreign. I tried to explain to Sarah that things felt wrong, but she kept reassuring me that everything was normal. After hanging up, I decided to explore more of this version of my world. I went outside, and everything looked almost the same, but there were subtle differences. Neighbours I'd never seen before greeted me warmly. The cars parked on the streets were models that didn't exist in my regular world. Even the street names had slight variations. This bizarre experience continued for the entire day. I tried to go about my life as normally as possible, but there was always an underlying current of wrongness. Eventually, exhausted and overwhelmed, I went to bed, hoping it would all make sense in the morning. When I woke up the next day, everything was back to normal. The unfamiliar blue mug was gone. The fridge had my usual brands, and my phone was full of messages and contacts I recognized. I called Sarah, my real best friend, and she greeted me just like she always did. There was no mention of our strange conversation from the day before. I tried to brush it off as a vivid dream, but I knew deep down it wasn't. It was too real, too coherent, to be a simple figment of my imagination. Even now I wonder if I somehow slipped into a parallel universe for that day. If anyone has experienced anything like this, please let me know. It'd be comforting to know that I'm not alone in this. So this happened back when the lockdowns were in place. It was a weird and somewhat unsettling couple of months, and the memories of which still play on my mind, and I'm hoping someone can help me make sense of it. I live alone in a small apartment. I work from home as a freelance writer. Given my health conditions, I'm considered high risk, so I've been extra cautious during the lockdowns, avoiding any physical contact and barely letting anyone into my home. It all started when I discovered a small key on my kitchen counter. It was a type of key you'd use for a suitcase. Tiny, with a black rectangular plastic head. I immediately recognized it as similar to the key from my childhood, one my parents would use on their suitcase when we went on trips. But I hadn't owned anything like that ever. Confused, I tried to think about how it could have gotten there. I live alone and haven't had any visitors for the longest time. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it fell out of an old box or something. I set it aside, planning to figure it out later. Over the next few days, the key started moving. It was subtle at first. I'd leave it on the kitchen counter at night and find it on the coffee table the next morning. I figured I must have moved it and forgotten. But then, it started appearing in more improbable places. One night I left it on my desk in my home office, only to find it in the bathroom the next morning. I began documenting its movements. I would take pictures of the key's location before I went to bed and check its position in the morning. Without fail, it was always in a different spot. The movements weren't limited to small distances anymore. The key could be in one room the night before and in another the next morning. I thought maybe I was sleepwalking, but that didn't fit. I've never had a history of sleepwalking, and nothing else in my apartment was disturbed, just the key. Then one day, the key was just gone. I clearly recalled leaving it on my kitchen bench. I even documented it. I tore my apartment apart looking for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. For a week, it was as if the key never existed. On the 8th day, I woke to the surprise that the key had reappeared, exactly where it had first appeared, on the kitchen counter. As I moved in to get a closer look, I came to the realization that it wasn't actually the key that was there. It was a stain in the exact same shape as the key. Dark, kind of like a shadow. I scrubbed at it, but no amount of cleaning would make it disappear. But the key itself never came back. Finally, after attempting numerous times with numerous different chemicals and substances, I gave up trying to clean away the stain. finally, it just suddenly disappeared. For good, or so I thought. It's been years since I last saw the key, or the shadowy stain. I haven't told anyone about it because I can't bear the thought of people thinking I'm losing my mind. Thanks for listening. Hi there. I'm a 39-year-old female, and this occurred, I think, a little over a year ago. This was a very real event. No drugs, no alcohol. I was in our bathroom, which had a line of sight out the back window to where my hubby passes by before coming in the door. So I was just doing my hair and looked over to see him outside the window walking up, switching the Kroger bag to his other hand to grab his keys. Then heard the door and watched him walk by the kitchen. I said, "Hey baby," and he didn't hear me. Not surprising, his hearing isn't the best. But I heard him lay the bags down, then lay his keys and wallet down. So I stuck a clip in that last bit of hair to do, and started out of the bathroom door to give him a hug and kiss. Well, here it is. Instantly when I walked outside the doorway of the bathroom, everything was completely different. All the lights were out, and they had certainly been on a moment prior. Totally weirded out, I felt shaky and whatnot, but I guess managed to walk a few steps to look toward the kitchen, only to see my husband wasn't even there. Then, before I even had time to attempt to process what the hell just happened, I saw through our kitchen window his headlights coming down the driveway. This was when I started to get extra weirded out, and for sure had to sit down. I remember I propped myself sitting on the edge of the couch arm, and next part is what freaks me out the absolute most. I couldn't believe my eyes at all. As I watched him walk across that window, it was like someone had just literally rewound a tape and was replaying it. The exact same motions, the same exact sounds, all the way through, including him setting the keys and bags down. The only thing I could think at that point is how crazy I would actually sound if I told anyone. Except I told my husband right when he got there. So I just want to know if anyone has any ideas of what happened. I'm open to hear about it. It's the single, most unbelievable, existential type thing that's happened in my life. I will never forget it. Thank you to anyone who bothered to listen. So, I wanted to share a rather unsettling experience I've had recently. I've been trying to piece it together, but it still creeps me out whenever I think about it. To this day, it's probably the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. So, last Friday, my school had an early finish day, and I got home around 1 p.m. My dad comes home around 6:30 p.m, so I knew I'd have the house to myself for a while. Nothing unusual there. I've been home alone plenty of times. I made myself a quick snack, just a PB&J and some chips, and plopped down in front of the TV in the living room. I remember feeling pretty relaxed, grateful for the early end to the school week. About 15 minutes into my show, I heard heavy footsteps coming down the hallway, leading away from the kitchen. At first, I thought maybe I was just hearing things, but the footsteps grew louder and clearer. I knew the sound of them. They sounded exactly like my dad's footsteps. I glanced up and saw my dad walking past the living room doorway, headed toward the front of the house. The weirdest part was that he was staring right at me the whole time, but didn't slow down or say a word. It was definitely his face, his clothes, everything. I figured he must have come home early for some reason. Maybe something to do with work. "Dad?" I called out, expecting him to backpack and explain. No response. He must be in a hurry, I thought, and went back to my show. But the image of him walking past so silently really stuck with me. Not 5 minutes later, I heard those same heavy footsteps again. This time I was more alert. I looked up and sure enough, my dad walked past the doorway again, still staring at me, but with the same unnerving silence. My heart started to race. It was strange that he didn't acknowledge me, and even weirder that he was apparently pacing my house without so much as a word. It definitely looked like him, and the footsteps sounded like his. The feeling I got from him was not the same feeling I got from my dad. I grabbed my phone and called him, but it went straight to voicemail. A growing sense of dread filled the room. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe he left his phone in the car or something. Just as I was about to head down the hallway to find him, my phone rang. It was my dad. "Hey, what's up?" he said cheerily. "Did you come home early today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No. I'm at the office. Won't be home until around 6:30 as usual." "Why?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "I thought I saw you," I stammered. "Someone who looks exactly like you is walking around the house." There was a long pause. "Stay where you are. I'll leave work early and be home as soon as I can. Just lock the door and don't move." I did as he said, my mind racing with all kinds of terrifying possibilities. I stayed glued to my spot, every creak of the old house amplifying my anxiety. The footsteps had stopped, but the house now felt eerie and dead silent. My dad got home about an hour later, clearly on edge. We searched the entire house together, but of course we found nothing out of the ordinary. No signs of anyone else having been there. That evening, over dinner, I finally told both my parents what I had seen. To my surprise, they exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. My mum sighed and said, "I've seen him too." They went on to share their own bizarre encounters. My dad had apparently seen what I now know as a doppelganger of me a few months ago while I was at school. My mum had seen herself in the hallway mirror, just standing and staring blankly back. More than once, actually. We've lived in this house a couple of years now, and while we've all experienced little oddities here and there, nothing had been quite like this. To this day, we still don't have an explanation. Maybe our house is haunted, or perhaps there's some other phenomenon at play. All I know is that I'm not keen on staying home alone anymore. I had my first encounter with a doppelganger 2 weeks ago. I convinced myself it was in my head. Must have been a waking dream of sorts. Me and my boyfriend went out. I myself had only 2 beers over the 5.5 hours we were out, so not even buzzed. I was in my kitchen, waiting for my dog to finish his business so I could lock up and go to bed, when I see movement to my right. To put this in context, my kitchen is a rectangle, with my family room to my left. My living room would be behind me with my master bedroom off that to the right, and to the right of my kitchen is the laundry room. Open floor plan. Okay, back to the movement on my right. I turned, confused, because I thought my boyfriend had went into the bedroom to start getting things ready for bed, when I see him in the doorway to the laundry room smiling at me. Then he did a 180 very dramatically, took a step forward, and proceeded to comically walk behind the wall into the laundry room. Monty Python's Flying Circus Ministry of Silly Walks bit is the closest I can come to describing how he walked away. I, confused, followed, asking him what he was smoking. There was no one there. There was no way out of the laundry room. One way in, one way out. Then it came back this morning, and this time my dog reacted. It showed up again in my bedroom doorway, smiling, and gestured for me to follow. I was 100% sure my boyfriend was outside getting our vehicles started for work. My dog freaked out and got between it and myself, and he was pissed. And when I looked down at him and tried to grab him, because shoot, I don't know what the hell it is, but I don't want it to hurt my dog, it was just gone. I looked in my bedroom, my closet, and my attached bathroom. Nothing. There is no other way out. It would have had to have walked through me to get away. Why did it want me to follow it? A few nights ago, my husband and I decided to go outside for a last beer in the fresh air before bed, as we often do. He often keeps a stash of some beer in the fridge in our detached garage, but I preferred the ones in the kitchen. I walked to the fridge in the kitchen to grab a couple of beers, and was going to bring one for my husband as well. But when I looked up, I saw him heading towards the detached garage. So I figured, never mind. I'll just grab one since he's probably getting his own from out there. For reference, our detached garage is a short walk from the house, but it's on the side and slightly obscured from the back door. As soon as I looked down to put the extra beer back in the fridge, my husband, who was now somehow right behind me, asks for his beer. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I asked him how he got behind me so quickly since I literally just saw him heading to the garage. He told me he didn't go to the garage. He went to check the mailbox with mail in his hand. The mailbox is in the opposite direction of the garage. I was positive he was messing with me and kept asking if he was joking. He said no. He walked to the mailbox and back. Check the cameras, he said. I checked the cameras, still convinced he was pranking me. He never went to the garage. He went to the mailbox and back. Nobody was near the garage at all. I swear, I saw him heading to the garage. The next night, we had another strange experience. We were watching TV in the living room when I heard a noise from the kitchen. It sounded like the fridge opening and closing. Wondering what it was, I got up to check. As I walked towards the kitchen, I saw my husband standing there, looking puzzled. "Did you already finish your beer?" I asked. He looked at me, confused. "I've been here the whole time." My heart started racing. I was sure, no, positive, he was sitting right next to me on the couch a few minutes ago. I ran back to the living room to check, and to my surprise, there was no one there. But there was a faint indent in the couch where someone may have been sitting. The feeling of unease settled deep in my stomach. A few nights later, things got even creepier, if that's even possible. We were lying in bed, just about to fall asleep, when I heard what sounded like footsteps in the hallway. My husband had been up late working in his office down the hall, so I assumed it was him coming to bed. But when I turned over to ask him if he was finally done for the night, he was lying right next to me, sound asleep. I shook him awake and told him I heard someone in the hallway. He groggily got up and checked, but there was nothing. The house was silent. We both went back to bed, uneasy but too tired to discuss it further. In the morning, we talked about the noise and decided to check the cameras again. As we reviewed the footage, we saw something truly disturbing. While we were in bed, the camera outside the front of the house caught a figure that looked exactly like my husband, standing at the edge of the driveway, staring at the house. He didn't move. He just stood there, facing the house. It sent chills down my spine. We stared at each other, not knowing what to make of it. Who or what had been standing outside? Was it the same person I had seen heading to the garage? Why were these sightings happening more frequently? Last night we determined to stay awake and keep an eye out. My husband set up his laptop in the living room, connected to all the camera feeds. Every little noise made us jumpy, but we stayed vigilant. around 2 a.m., just when we thought it might have been all in our heads, we saw it again. The figure appeared at the edge of our driveway, slowly moving towards the house. It looked exactly like my husband. Same height, same build, even the same clothes he wore that day. We watched in terror as it got closer and closer, only stopping right at the front door. My husband grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat and cautiously approached the door. I monitored the cameras, keeping an eye on every angle. He swung the door open and shone the flashlight outside, but there was nothing there. No sign of anyone or anything. One moment it was there, the next it had vanished. The rest of the night was a blur. We barely slept, but the feeling of unease hadn't left us. This morning, over coffee, we discussed what had happened. We resolved to document every incident and consider getting more sophisticated security equipment. These events were becoming too frequent to ignore, and we needed to understand what was happening to keep our sanity intact. So far, we have no answers, only more questions. I work a typical 9-to-5 job, but due to an unexpected system outage at the office, we were sent home early. I arrived back at my apartment around 11:45 a.m., which was a nice surprise since I was expecting a long day. My roommate, Sam, works from home and usually stays cooped up in his room, totally engrossed in his work. I figured the early afternoon would be a good chance for us to hang out a bit, so I made myself a quick snack and sat down with my laptop in the living room. About 20 minutes later, I heard Sam's door open. His room is right next to the living room, so it caught my attention immediately. I looked up and saw Sam staring at me from his doorway. He didn't say anything. He just stood there looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Hey Sam," I called out. "Everything all right?" He didn't respond, just kept staring for a few unsettling seconds before turning and heading down the hall towards the bathroom. It was odd, but I chalked it up to him being engrossed in some work-related problem. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps again, this time coming back from the bathroom. I looked up and saw him walking back. He walked straight past me, again without saying a word. He went back into his room. I called out to him again, but no response. It was getting really weird. Sam isn't the type to just ignore me like that. I decided to text him. "Hey man, you good? You walked past me twice without saying anything." To my surprise, Sam replied almost instantly. "I'm on a call, haven't left my room since lunch. Why?" A chill ran down my spine. If Sam hadn't left his room, who or what had I seen walking around my apartment? I decided to knock on his door. Sam opened it almost immediately, headset still on, and gave me a puzzled look. "What's up?" "I thought I saw you out here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone who looked just like you walked past me, twice." Sam's face went pale. He glanced around the room, then muttered, "Just give me a minute," to whoever was on the call, and pulled me into his room, shutting the door behind us. "Are you sure it wasn't just a trick of the light or something?" he asked, clearly trying to rationalize it. "No way," I insisted. "It was definitely you. Same clothes and everything." Sam nodded slowly and picked up his phone. "Let's check the security camera." Our apartment came with a basic security system, including a camera in the hallway. We pulled up the footage and fast forward to around the time I started hearing the footsteps. My heart pounded as I watched the timestamp tick closer and closer. And there it was. Sam, or what looked exactly like him, walking out of his room, staring directly at the couch where I was sitting, then heading towards the bathroom. A few minutes later, the same figure walked back down the hall and re-entered Sam's room. But here's the kicker. The real Sam never moved from his chair. We both watched in stunned silence. The figure was an exact copy down to the slightest detail, but it wasn't Sam. Nothing else happened for the rest of the day, but neither of us could shake the unease. That evening, we discussed what had happened. Sam confided that he had sometimes felt watched in the apartment, but he always brushed it off as his imagination. Being someone who's somewhat interested in the paranormal, I believe it was a doppelganger. But why? We're both freaked out and have started looking into ways to cleanse the apartment, just in case. Something happened to me last week that was too eerie to keep to myself. I'm hoping someone can shed some light on it because honestly, I'm freaked out. I live in a small town and work the night shift at a local diner. It's not usually busy, so I'm often alone until my coworker, Jenny, comes in at dawn. Last night was one of those slow nights. Around 2 a.m. I was wiping down the counter when I heard the bell over the door jingle. I looked up and saw a woman walk in. She was wearing a long coat and looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Welcome," I said, forcing a smile despite the late hour. "Can I get you anything?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to the counter and sat down on one of the stools, staring at me intently. Her eyes had a strange intensity that made me uncomfortable. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettlingly familiar about her features, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I tried again. "Can I help you?" No response. She just continued to stare. Her silence was unnerving, so I decided to get her a coffee anyway. I poured a mug and placed it in front of her, but she didn't touch it. As I went back to cleaning, I kept glancing her way. She hadn't moved, just kept staring at me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Do I know you from somewhere?" I asked, hoping to break the tension. No response. She remained silent and unmoving, her gaze locked on me. It was then I noticed something truly unsettling. She looked exactly like me. Same face, same hair tied back in a ponytail, even wearing similar clothes. I felt my blood turn to ice. I was looking at my exact double. I reached out a hand, trembling slightly. But just as my fingers were about to touch her, she stood up abruptly. The sudden movement startled me, and I stepped back. Before she turned to leave, she uttered a single sentence, one that has stuck with me since. "Stay here until dawn." And then she abruptly turned and left, without saying another word. Her voice was so flat, yet so familiar. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this some kind of warning, a threat? I debated whether to call the police, but decided against it, thinking they might dismiss it as a prank or a case of mistaken identity. Her message kept echoing in my mind. As my shift ended, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I decided to heed the warning and stayed put in the diner, much to the confusion of Jenny when she arrived. "Why are you still hanging around?" she asked, concerned. I explained what happened, and we both sat there trying to make sense of it. As dawn broke, my phone buzzed with a news alert. There had been a gas leak in my apartment complex that resulted in an explosion around 4 a.m. Several apartments, including mine, were heavily damaged. If I had gone home, I could have been seriously injured, or even worse. I showed Jenny the news, and she turned pale. "Who was that woman?" she asked, voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Was she a doppelganger? A guardian angel? Or something else entirely? All I know is that her warning saved my life. This happened to me last year. It was really strange and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It was a Saturday and I decided to take a break from my busy city life and go for a hike in the nearby mountains. There's a trail I love that loops around the small lake and offers some stunning views. It's usually not very crowded, which is perfect for me when I want some peace and quiet. I set off early in the morning, hoping to catch the sunrise over the lake. The air was crisp, and I could hear birds chirping as I made my way up the trail. Everything was going as planned until I reached the halfway point, just above the lake. As I was climbing a particularly steep section, I spotted another hiker about 30 feet ahead of me. The odd thing was, he was wearing the exact same clothes as me. A blue jacket, black hiking pants, and even the same brand of boots. I remember thinking that it was a funny coincidence, and I quickened my pace a bit to catch up and maybe share a laugh about our similar outfits. When I got closer, I called out, "Hey, nice jacket." The hiker turned around and my blood ran cold. It was like looking into a mirror. He had my face, my hair, even my slight stubble. Every detail was identical. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other in shock. Then he, my doppelganger, smiled and said, "I thought I was the only one with this jacket." His voice was exactly like mine too. I mustered up a nervous laugh and replied, "Yeah, small world, I guess." Trying to keep my composure, I extended my hand. "Name's Alex." He shook my hand and I could feel the same roughness from our shared hiking trips. "Alex," he echoed. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was going insane. We fell into step together, and as we walked, I cautiously asked him about his life. Every single detail matched mine. He lived in the same city, he had the same job, and even mentioned pets that I owned. It was like talking to my twin, except I knew I didn't have one. When we reached the lake, we sat down on a rock to enjoy the view. That's when things got even weirder. My doppelganger gazed across the water and said, "I come here to clear my head. Sometimes I feel like my life isn't real, like I'm just living someone else's story." His words struck a chord with me, because I had been feeling the same way recently. Everything in my life had been running on autopilot, and I was struggling with a sense of déjà vu, of living the same day over and over. We sat in silence for a while. Then he stood up and said, "I'm glad we met. Maybe this means something. Take care, Alex." With that, he gave me a nod and walked off down the trail. I watched him until he disappeared from sight, then made my way back to my car, feeling like I'd been in a dream. Since that encounter, I've been obsessed with finding out what happened. I've read about doppelgangers and the theories surrounding them, but none of them make sense to me. Also, from what I've read, they don't usually speak. Was he perhaps a glimpse into an alternate version of my life? A warning? I don't know. The encounter still troubles me to this day. We had just moved into a new house on the border of Victoria, Australia. My dad always wanted to live on a farm, so we bought a small, run-down house with a big piece of land. When my family and I first went to check out the house, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I didn't say anything about it, and just kept my feelings to myself. Finally, the day came, and we moved in. My bedroom was on the top floor, and it had a tiny window. After unpacking all day, I was so tired that I fell asleep on my mattress. During the night, I was jolted awake by the slamming of doors, footsteps echoing in the hallway, and a sudden chill in the air. Was it a ghost? Dad always said there were no such things as monsters or ghosts. Maybe he was wrong. After that night, nothing spooky happened for a week. On Saturday night, Mum and Dad went out for dinner by themselves, so I was left alone in the house. I would have called a friend, but I had just moved, so I didn't know anyone yet. So I decided to watch some TV. While watching, I heard a strange noise coming from the driveway. Our driveway is really long, so I grabbed a flashlight and went to check it out. The sound was almost like a girl crying or being hurt, but I wasn't sure. I walked down the driveway to see what was going on. Suddenly, I felt a presence beside me. I looked down, but no one was there. Even though it scared me, I tried not to let it bother me too much. To this day, there are still footsteps echoing in the hallway. Doors creak open by themselves. And sometimes, I feel an unexplained cold spot in certain rooms.
Over the last few months, strange things have been happening here. The first sign of something out of the ordinary was when I woke up one morning to find my bedroom door locked from the outside, with the inside being unlocked. When I go to bed, it's the other way around, as logically, I can't lock the door on the outside while I'm standing inside. I got home from work one night the next week to discover this time that the door was locked inside and unlocked outside, completely opposite of how I'd left it. And now this. As I type this, my dog is going berserk, barking, scratching and sniffing at my bedroom door, where 2 hours ago, an unseen something slammed the door hard against my hand as I reached in to turn the light off. I've only been living in this house for a bit under 2 years, and my current room is just over 2 months. My sister lived in there the whole time before I moved my stuff in, and she says she never experienced anything unusual. Am I being targeted?
My mates and I had always been curious about the old abandoned mine at the edge of our town, hidden deep within the bushland of Western Australia. Legend said it was haunted by the ghosts of miners who met unfortunate ends. Despite the warnings from our parents, we decided to sneak in and explore it one night. The air was thick with the scent of moist earth and decaying leaves as we trudged through the bush. With only our flashlights to guide us, we reached the entrance of the mine. It was a gaping, dark hole that seemed to swallow the light. Despite a feeling of apprehension, we stepped inside. The inside of the mine was eerily silent, except for the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. As we delved deeper, the air grew colder, and there was a palpable sense of dread. Just as we were about to turn back, we noticed faint, ghostly lights moving in the distance. They floated around, then disappeared into the darkness. Undeterred, we decided to follow them. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. We heard whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves, telling tales of the miners' tragic past. Broken tools and old mining carts littered the pathways, like artifacts from another time. At one point, my flashlight suddenly flickered and went out. In the pitch black, I felt something brush past me. My friend screamed as his flashlight revealed a fleeting shadow with hollow eyes, staring back at us. It vanished just as quickly as it appeared. Panicking, we tried to retrace our steps, but the mine seemed to change its layout. Tunnels that led us in were replaced by new, unfamiliar passages. Fear tightened its grip on us, and we ran in an attempt to escape. Eventually we stumbled upon a makeshift altar with old helmets and other mining gear arranged on it. The atmosphere was suffocating with the sense of despair and longing. Just as we thought we were lost forever, a faint light appeared, guiding us back to the entrance. We didn't question our luck. We just bolted out of the mine and didn't stop running until we reached the safety of our homes. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear the faint whispers and see the ghostly lights whenever I closed my eyes. It's been 20 years now, and none of us have ever spoken of that night again. But we all knew one thing was for sure. The ghosts of the abandoned mine were real, and they didn't like to be disturbed.
This story is very recent, and I'm curious as to why it happened. I was trying to get to sleep one night, but I wasn't very tired. I was laying in my room, which has another spare room next to it. The door of the spare room was open, and I was staring at my large bear collection, trying to sleep. All of a sudden, my bears started talking to me, which of course is very odd. I thought I was going crazy. It took me a moment to really listen to what they were saying. They were urgently telling me, "Don't let Elka get you." I got very scared and wondered if I was imagining it, wondering how I was imagining it. I didn't know anyone called Elka, and I still don't. I was about to yell for my mum when the voices stopped, and a tall, dark shadow came out of the spare bedroom, wandering into my room. I completely froze. I have a very, very great fear of ghosts, having seen them on multiple occasions. But this one was clearly not nice like the ones I'd seen before. I could feel it. It suddenly got very cold, and I wanted to pull up my doona, but I was too scared to move. The shadow that was standing in my doorway suddenly began lumbering towards me. It came closer and sat on the end of my bed, and I felt the bed move, like someone really was sitting on it. It sat there for about a minute, lurching over the bed, and then left. Every night from then on, I have kept that spare room door shut. Does anyone know why this would have happened? It was very strange, very different to the spirits I've normally seen.
My family and I were on a road trip through the Nullarbor Plain, a vast arid expanse stretching across Western and South Australia. One evening we decided to set up camp near a desolate area known to locals as the Eucla Telegraph Station ruins. The site intrigued us, and we figured it would be an interesting spot to camp for the night. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the sandy terrain, we pitched our tents and started a campfire. The stillness of the Nullarbor was both peaceful and eerie. My little sister asked Dad to tell us a ghost story, and he obliged with an old tale about the spirits of explorers who once travelled these remote lands. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. I stepped out of my tent to get some fresh air and was greeted by an unsettling sight. In the distance, a figure stood, barely visible in the moonlight. It was tall and seemed to be draped in ragged clothing, staring directly at our camp. My heart raced as I considered waking my parents, but something in me felt compelled to approach the figure. As I drew nearer, the figure turned and started to walk away, almost gliding over the sand. Curious and unnerved, I followed, keeping a safe distance. The figure led me to the ruins of the old Euclid telegraph station, now partially buried in sand. Suddenly, the air around me grew cold, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The figure stopped in front of one of the crumbling walls, turned to face me, and then vanished into thin air. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a whispering sound, like a breeze blowing through the ruins. But there was no wind. The whispers grew louder, turning into unintelligible, frenetic murmurs that surrounded me. Shadows danced on the walls, and I felt an icy hand brush against my cheek. Panic set in, and I sprinted back to the camp as fast as I could. When I reached the tents, I was out of breath, heart pounding, and covered in cold sweat. I didn't wake anyone. I just crawled into my sleeping bag, trying to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream. The next morning I checked the area around the ruins, but there were no signs of the figure or anything unusual. I never spoke of that night again, but I could never shake the feeling that something from another time lingered in the ruins of the Euclid telegraph station. Something that wanted to remind the living of its haunting presence.
I have been having experiences with the paranormal since I was about 12 or 13. I'm 21 now. As a teenager, a few friends and I used to conduct seances and do things to scare ourselves. Many things happened to us in these times, and we eventually understood that we didn't know what we were doing. So we stopped playing around with things that we didn't understand. When I was about 16, we moved into a very old house where my uncle used to live. I still remember those 3 or 4 days after we had moved in. I was home alone, and I could hear a PowerPoint flicking in the next room next door. I knew it was a spirit, but I didn't feel threatened by it. But as the years passed, I noticed there was more than one spirit. One minute, I would feel completely relaxed. The next minute, I would get the creeps. This is how I came to the conclusion that there was more than one of these things lurking around. Many friends that have come to my house have commented on feeling like they were being watched. One actually said that they felt it was an old man, which is funny because I felt that too. I don't live inside the actual house, but in a bungalow out in the backyard. 2 or 3 years ago, I started to notice a presence creeping into my room, like I was constantly being watched from one particular spot. And there would also be these cracking noises. I did feel like I wasn't wanted out there, and it did give me the creeps. About 18 months ago, I had this bizarre experience where I thought I was dreaming. A lady with an angry look on her face walked fast towards me and slapped me. I woke up, holding my face. I've always wondered whether I was in this semi-sleep state, and did this actually happen for real? Things have been going missing. My TV remote has never been found, even after I turned my room upside down looking for it. Water droplets have fallen on me from nowhere. A few years ago, I had real problems with sleepwalking. In the last year, things have been getting crazy. I get the feeling this spirit doesn't want me sleeping, because whenever I get into that stage where I'm about to drift into a deep sleep, I hear this loud thud or a crack or something falling over. I've also been waking up with bruises on my knuckles. I've been at breaking point in the last 2 weeks. It seems this thing has become very angry with me. I don't know why. I've been hearing footsteps circling my bed, strings being plucked on my guitar, the window blinds moving, and loud thuds against the wall. It has scared me so much that I've begun sleeping inside the house. And then I got worried that I had given it the upper hand, given it confidence. So the next night, I went back out and everything was fine. But the very next night, things started up again. As soon as I heard it was back, I sat up in my bed and said out loud, "Do you want to start, do ya?" The second I said that, a poster ripped off the wall and stuff flew out from under my bed. I slept inside again that night. 2 nights ago, I decided to smudge. The night I smudged, I removed surfboards and stuff from the corner. Then I felt like I was being watched, where the spirit stood. Everything was fine that night. Last night, after smudging, I was paid a visit yet again. It was early in the night. Only around 8:30 p.m. I went to bed. There was tapping on the windows, footsteps, like someone running, and it sounded like something was being thrown from wall to wall. Again, I went and slept inside. Things do happen inside. They just don't scare me as much, and I don't feel as if they're after me. Well, I did think that. Last night, when I was sleeping on my mum's bed, I woke up to the feeling that something was hovering above my face. Then, in an instant, it was gone. I also woke up twice being shaken. I've also experienced this in my room. I don't know what to do. I've asked them to leave. I've smudged, and I've laid out salt around my windows. What else? I feel like I'm helpless, and no one else can help me either. The thing that scares me as well is that I'm moving house in a few weeks. I'm scared that whatever this is going to follow me, and I will be living alone.
It was a Friday night. My cousin and her brother were staying over at our house in Bathurst, New South Wales. My cousin was about 15 years old. We lived in a 2-story home, so my parents and her brother were downstairs in the den. My younger sister and I were in the living room, and my older cousin was in a spare bedroom getting ready to sleep. I was curled up on the couch, watching TV, when suddenly, a loud scream split the air. I jumped up and ran to the spare room to see what happened. My cousin was sitting upright, her face pale. She said the bed had been shaking while she was on it. Thinking it was a joke, I told her to stop messing around and went back to the couch. 15 minutes later, another scream came, even louder and more frantic than before. I rushed back to the spare room yelling, "What's wrong now?" With wide eyes, she said the bed was shaking again. I was just about to walk away when the bed started moving crazily right in front of us. It shook back and forth like someone or something was gripping it. My cousin burst into tears and jumped off the bed, and the shaking stopped instantly. I checked under the bed, sure that her brother was pranking us, but there was nothing there. Was it a poltergeist? To this day, I don't know if we imagined it or if it was something real. Neither my cousin nor I have talked about it since, but a week later, another strange thing happened. It was a quiet Wednesday evening. I was alone in the house, reading a book. My family had gone out for dinner and I just wanted some quiet time. I was deep into a suspenseful chapter when I heard faint whispers from the hallway. I thought it was just the house settling or the wind outside, and brushed it off. But the whispers got louder and seemed to come closer. My heart pounded as I put my book down and listened harder. It wasn't my imagination. There were real, murmuring voices in the hallway. Summoning all my courage, I walked towards the sound. The whispers stopped the moment I stepped into the hallway. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran through me. Nothing further happened that night, though. Over the next few days, weird things happened more often. Lights flickered for no reason, doors creaked open by themselves, and some rooms had cold spots. We tried to tell ourselves it was faulty wiring or drafts, but it happened so much that it became hard to ignore. One night, while brushing my teeth, I saw a shadowy figure in the bathroom mirror behind me. My blood ran cold and I quickly turned around, but the room was empty. I splashed water on my face, hoping I was just tired, but the image of that shadow stuck with me. My younger sister and I were too frightened to sleep alone, so we started sharing a room. Our nights were filled with uneasy sleep and whispers of, "Did you hear that?" during the dark, quiet hours. We didn't tell our parents, afraid they wouldn't believe us or would think we were just causing trouble. One night, the strange activities reached a peak. My family and I were in the living room trying to watch a movie. Halfway through, the lights flickered and the room became freezing. We huddled together, our breath visible in the cold air. Suddenly, the TV turned to static and whispers filled the room. The whispers got louder, almost deafening, and objects started moving by themselves. Books flew off shelves, picture frames broke, and an old clock chimed wildly. Panicking, we ran to the den for safety. The creepy activity followed us as if something unseen wanted us gone. In the chaos, we decided we couldn't stay there any longer. We packed our things and left the house that night, staying at a family friend's place. Leaving was hard, but necessary for our peace of mind. Weeks later, when we came back to get our belongings, the house felt different. The creepy presence seemed to have gone, leaving an eerie silence. We moved out soon after, leaving behind what was once our home, but had turned into a place of unexplained terror. Hey everyone. I need to get this off my chest because it's been bothering me ever since it happened. This is going to sound crazy, but bear with me. A few weeks ago, a group of my friends and I decided to rent a secluded cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. It was supposed to be just a fun trip to disconnect from our busy lives and reconnect with nature. We had all the usual stuff packed, but my buddy Jake brought along something extra, a Ouija board he bought online just for kicks. None of us really believed in that paranormal stuff. It was just a game, right? The first day at the cabin was perfect. We hiked, grilled, and sat around the fire catching up and telling stories. As the evening rolled in, Jake pulled out the Ouija board. We all laughed, thinking it'd be a fun way to end the night. Mind you, the cabin was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but thick woods. Perfect setting for a spooky story, but we thought nothing of it. Jake set up the board on the wooden coffee table in the cabin's living room. The cabin itself was rustic, with old furniture and creaky floors. Charming, but adding to the eerie vibe. We all gathered around, placed our fingers on the planchette, and started asking the board stupid questions like, "Is anyone here? What's your name?" Stuff like that. We were giggling and making jokes. But then, the air in the room seemed to shift. The planchette started moving. At first, we thought Jake was just messing with us, but he swore he wasn't. This was confirmed by the look on his face. Jake was not a good actor. The board spelled out Hello, slowly, and we all got chills. Anna, who was the biggest skeptic, got spooked and wanted to stop, but we continued thinking it was just a fluke or someone playing a prank. We asked, "What do you want?" And the board spelled out PAIN. That killed the mood real fast. We decided to call it a night, joked about it, and went to bed. But that was when things started getting really weird. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my window. I chalked it up to animals, but the sound was heavy, not something a deer or raccoon would make. Also, it sounded bipedal. Then Jake burst into our room, pale as a ghost. He said he heard whispering and felt something tugging at his sheets. We all piled into the living room and decided to stick together. As the night went on, things got worse. The lights flickered, we heard knocking on the doors and windows, and the cold spots in the cabin felt like blocks of ice. We were freaking out, but trying to rationalize everything. By dawn, we were exhausted and terrified. We spent the next day trying to enjoy ourselves, but the mood was off. There was this oppressive feeling lingering in the air, like we were being watched. That night, none of us wanted to touch the Ouija board again. We stored it away in Jake's bag, hoping that would help. But it didn't. The second night was worse. Anna started seeing shadows in the corners of the room, and Mike claimed he saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, just staring at the cabin. We decided that was enough. We cut the trip short and packed up to leave the next morning. After another terrifying and sleepless night, we left. When we got back home, we tried to laugh it off. The weirdness followed us. Specifically, it followed Jake. For the next week, he was constantly on edge, saying he saw shadows at his place and felt cold touches on his skin. He couldn't sleep and felt like something was always right behind him. It got so bad that he ended up burning the Ouija board in his backyard, hoping to get rid of whatever he might have brought back with him. Since then, things have calmed down, but Jake hasn't been the same. He's more reserved and easily spooked. Honestly, we all feel a bit unsettled, like we brushed up against something we shouldn't have. I know it sounds nuts, but I honestly think there was something dark at that cabin, and that board was the key to stirring it up. So lesson learned. Don't mess with Ouija boards, especially in the middle of nowhere. And if you're ever tempted, just don't. It's not worth it. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there. Being a teenager in a small town means you have to get creative with your entertainment. For my friends and me, that meant ghost hunting. We were heavily inspired by ghost hunting TV shows and YouTube channels. The ones where they explore supposedly haunted places and communicate with spirits. It looked so cool, and we figured, why not give it a try ourselves? There were 5 of us. Me, Sam, Jake, Mia, Alex, and our newest member, Danny. We called ourselves the Ghostbusters. Not very original, but it worked for us. Our headquarters was Jake's garage, cluttered with all sorts of junk that we thought could pass off as ghost hunting gear. We were all about 17 and none of us could afford any real equipment, so we made do with what we had. One evening we stumbled upon a story about an old abandoned mansion just out of town. People said it was haunted by the original owner, who tragically lost his family in a fire there. Supposedly, you could sometimes see ghostly figures in the windows or hear whispers in the hallways. Perfect for our next adventure. We knew we needed something to attract the spirits, and that's when Jake came up with a brilliant idea. A homemade Ouija board. We grabbed an old piece of wood, sketched out the letters, numbers, and yes and no with a marker, and fashioned a planchette out of a plastic bottle cap. It looked amateurish, but we were confident it would work. Late one Friday night, we biked out to the mansion. The place was massive and eerie, with ivy creeping up the walls and broken windows that gave it a sinister look. The front gate creaked as we pushed it open, and the overgrown path led us to the rotting front door. With a mix of excitement and nerves, we stepped inside. The interior was just as spooky as the outside. Dust-covered furniture, cobwebs in every corner, and an unsettling silence. We found a spot in what must have been the living room, the perfect place to set up our Ouija board. "Alright, let's do this," Jake said, his voice cracking a little. We sat in a circle, placing our fingers lightly on the planchette. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I noticed Mia's hands shaking slightly. Jake started with the usual questions. "Is anyone here with us?" The planchette didn't move at first, and I thought this might just be another one of our failed ghost hunts. But then, it slid slowly towards yes. We exchanged nervous glances, but pressed on, spellbound by the creepy perfection of our homemade device. "What is your name?" Jake asked. The planchette moved again, spelling out a name. My mouth went dry. We'd watched enough ghost hunting shows to know this was standard fare, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Mia asked the next question, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" The planchette moved faster this time, spelling out a 3-letter word. D-I-E. "Should we stop?" Danny suggested, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by a nervous quiver. "No way, let's keep going," Alex encouraged. "We've come this far." Jake nodded and continued, asking more questions about the mansion and what happened to the family. We expected more cryptic answers, but instead, the planchette just went wild, sliding over the board so fast our figures barely kept up, landing on random letters without forming coherent words. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and a cold draft brushed against my neck, making me shiver. Suddenly, the air was filled with an oppressive feeling, and a low, whispering sound echoed throughout the room. I couldn't make out the words, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. The Ouija board began to spin on its own. faster and faster until it toppled off the table. We all jumped back, fear overtaking our bravado. As we scrambled to pack up, strange occurrences unfolded. Mia's hair suddenly lifted, as if an unseen hand was pulling it. She screamed, slapping at the air around her, tears streaming down her face. Jake's legs gave way out from under him, as if something had yanked him to the floor. He gasped in pain as his ankle twisted unnaturally. Desperate and terrified, we fled the house, but as we ran, the whispers grew louder, morphing into shrill, angry screams. Danny, who was at the back of the pack, suddenly froze, his eyes wide with horror. He turned to us, his face pale. "I can't move," he cried, looking down as if invisible chains held him in place. The rest of us pulled him, but a force stronger than all of us combined held him back. We turned back, just in time to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Its eyes glowed a menacing red, and it spoke in a voice that seemed to come from all directions at once.
"You should not have come here,"
it intoned. With a final pull, we yanked Danny free, sprinting back to our bikes, panting and hysterical. Back home, the consequences of our actions became clear. Jake's ankle didn't heal properly and required surgery, which left him with a permanent limp. Mia couldn't shake the feeling of cold, ghostly fingers brushing her hair, even during the day. Danny refused to talk about what happened and often stared into space, haunted by what he saw. As for me, every night just as I begin to drift off to sleep, I hear those whispers echoing through my mind. We never spoke about that night again, but the scars it left were more than just physical. So if you ever feel tempted to play Ghost Hunter, remember, not all spirits are friendly. This is a story from my teens. I'm in my early 20s now, so it was about 10 years ago. Moving into a new house is supposed to be exciting, right? My parents kept saying it was a fresh start, and I should be thrilled about it. Not many 13-year-olds get their own room in a big house. But from the moment we set foot in our new place, I had this uneasy feeling I couldn't shake off. I mean, everything felt normal at first. The house was old, yes, but charming with its creaky wooden floors and big, drafty windows. It even had a huge basement, which my parents thought would be great for storage, but I thought maybe it could be a cool hangout spot. While we were unpacking, I stumbled upon an old Ouija board, hidden away in a cardboard box in the basement. It looked ancient, with faded letters and a planchette that seemed like it had seen better days. I didn't think too much about it and shoved it back into the box. That Saturday, I had a few friends over for a sleepover. Emily, Sarah, and Jessica. We were huddled in my room, gossiping and munching on popcorn, when the conversation turned to spooky stuff, typical for 13-year-olds, I guess. Sarah, the most outgoing and boldest among us, dared us to share scary stories. That's when I stupidly mentioned the Ouija board I found in the basement. "No way, you actually have one?" Sarah's eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and mischief. "We have to try it out." I hesitated. My parents would freak if they found out. But Sarah's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon Emily and Jessica were on board too. Sarah kept bragging about how her older sister had one, and nothing ever happens. Eventually I gave in. We crept down to the basement, giggling nervously. The air down there was colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and dance in the dim light of our flashlight. I carefully pulled the board out, setting it on the concrete floor of the basement. We gathered around, sitting on the floor and placing our fingers lightly on the planchette. Sarah started asking typical questions. Is anyone there? And can you give us a sign? At first, nothing happened. We were about to give up when the planchette moved. Emily swore she wasn't pushing it, and neither was I. The planchette slowly spelled out H-E-L-L-O. We giggled nervously, but continued. Sarah asked the spirit's name and responded with A-D-A-M. Things started getting weird after that. The questions led to more unsettling answers about a boy named Adam who used to live in the house before mysteriously disappearing. We were sufficiently creeped out, so I suggested we stop, but Sarah insisted on continuing. That's when the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavier, and a chilling breeze swept through the basement out of nowhere. The planchette started moving faster, spelling out L-E-A-V-E repeatedly, and then eventually just spinning around the board in what looked like a figure eight. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into complete darkness. Emily screamed, and Jessica started crying. We scrambled to pack up the board and head back upstairs. Somehow, we got through the night without any more incidents, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. Days after the sleepover, strange things began happening. I'd hear whispers at night, feel something watching me, and see shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. My friends stopped coming over, and I felt increasingly isolated. I tried telling my parents, but they dismissed it as just my imagination. It got worse. One night I woke up to the feeling of cold fingers brushing my cheek. I screamed, but when my parents came in, there was nothing there. They suggested getting a nightlight, but that did nothing to drive away the fear. Weeks went by, and the presence grew stronger. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker, and I'd hear footsteps following me around the house. It felt like I was going crazy. My grades started slipping, and I barely got any sleep. Desperate for help, I reached out to Sarah's older sister, hoping she knew more about Ouija boards and spirits. She suggested a cleansing ritual, which I eagerly tried, but nothing worked. It seemed like Adam wasn't just tied to the board, but to me. Months passed, and the activity only intensified. My parents remained skeptical until one night they experienced it firsthand. They heard the footsteps, saw the lights flicker, and even felt the cold, eerie presence themselves. Finally, they believed me. Desperate to help, my parents brought in a spiritual advisor. She performed a cleansing ritual throughout the house, similar to the one that Sarah's sister recommended, but with a few more steps. And for a while, things seemed to calm down. However, it wasn't a complete fix. The presence never entirely left us. In the end, my parents ended up agreeing to move. Dad managed to resell the house for a similar price to what he bought it for, so it wasn't a complete loss for him. As I said, it's been about 10 years since all of this happened, and after moving out, Adam's spirit seemed to have left me. But every now and then, in the silence of night, I swear I can still hear whispers or see shadows moving. I don't play with Ouija boards anymore. I've learned my lesson the hard way. And if you ever think about trying one, just remember my story. I'll tell you my scariest story. I've had creepy experiences, religious experiences, and supernatural experiences, which I will stand by as being something otherworldly. This Ouija one isn't necessarily one of them, but it's not bullshit, and I don't have a great explanation. Halloween 2 years ago, me and a buddy decided to do something fun. We got the car, and I told him I really wanted to try a Ouija board. We went to Walmart, a game shop, Target. No boards. Finally, we get to a bookstore and search the whole game aisle, which was very small. We asked if they had any in the back, and the guy said he'd check. He comes back with nothing but says, "Wait, I think I saw one here." We check the shelves again, just for the hell of it, and there one is. We definitely checked the whole aisle, but honestly, this kind of thing happens a lot. So probably nothing supernatural, just us not seeing it. We made jokes about how it appeared, and we got the last one. We kept jokingly saying the night was meant for us. We took my car down to the woods. This place I know like the back of my hand. It was where I played as a kid and kind of my sanctuary. Me and my bros would jog or drink there sometimes. It was pitch black, so we didn't go all the way in and set up the board. We wanted to stay in the shadows, as a girl recently died on the tracks that ran through the woods when she was drunk and got caught under the train. My buddy Red received a call from a close friend of mine and his, as she had a fight with her boyfriend. Me and the other kid, Glenn, decided to get started. I was jokingly carving sigils and stuff into trees, and some other symbols I knew from an occult book I'd recently read, which, in hindsight, was probably stupid. But most were harmless sigils, just meant to open up the other side. I started using the board maybe 15 feet from Red, who was on his phone and hadn't moved. We asked some questions, and got mostly gibberish and the usual. Mostly, it barely moved. We kinda thought, damn, Ouija shit doesn't work. But Glenn was really into science, and was saying, it'll definitely work, but it's not spirits. It's just subconscious muscles. I was cool with that, just wanted to get something. After a couple of tries, we said, F it, let's go back to my place, or cruise around. But Red had just ended the call, and said he wanted one try at it. So I said we'd do it. At this point, it started getting weird. Red was pretty serious. If anything, the biggest joker there was me, and I can tell you, that I wasn't pranking anyone that night. He walked over to the board, and we noticed the little triangle was gone. We had had it seconds before, and looked around the busted picnic table we had used, and it was nowhere. A minute or two of searching led us to finding it, 15 feet away, where Red was sitting. He hadn't touched it at all that night, and he was the only one over there. Since we arrived, it had been me and Glenn on the table, and Red 15 feet away. Till Red walked to the table, no one was over there, leading us to think, how could it get all the way over there when it was here seconds before? I kinda shrugged it off, and maybe thought one of the guys had somehow snuck it over. But that's pretty unrealistic, unless they threw it when my back was turned, and neither of them seemed like they would. This really had no effect on us, and after a minute, we continued. Me and Red did the board. We asked about the mutual friend's relationship, something like, will they stay broken up? And got the letters H-E-L, with our eyes closed. Glenn would tell us when it had stopped, as well as the letter he saw. He also later assured us neither of the two of us had our eyes opened. We went for another letter. At this point, I thought, and later Red tells me he thought I was doing the same thing, that he was purposely controlling it to spell hell yes, as in they definitely would break up as a joke. We got to the last one, and it really wasn't on a letter. It was kinda on cue, so we decided it was just another jumbled up word. Well, then we both realized it was also half on P, so we all kinda got it at the same time. Help. We all totally freaked out. Like that feeling something is wrong and total dread. We grabbed all our stuff. Sometime in the night, I believe at this time, I grabbed a key from the table, thinking it was one of the guys. I don't believe it was there when we arrived, but I can't be totally sure about this either. I pushed it all in my pocket and ran. The rest of the night went fine and we were all kinds of spooked. I told them maybe it was the girl that was hit by the train. As it happened, maybe a couple 100 yards from us very recently, and she was doing the same shit we were doing that night. About a week later, I wore the same flannel again. In the top pocket was the key. Realizing it wasn't one of the guys, I posted it on our group chat with the picture. Whose key? Everyone said it wasn't theirs. I was sitting next to Red later and double checked it wasn't his. He was kind of spooked by the Ouija board, and I kept saying it was the ghost key, just to mess with him. I said I was going to leave it in his class to haunt the teacher. It was kind of a joke, as the teacher was kinda a weird dude, but also cause I didn't need the key. Might as well toss it. Red watched me toss the key into the trash. This was the teacher's last class of the day, and there was one more class till school was out. We went to the final class, and then when the bell rang, I left to the top floor, which held only the choir room. I was going to chill with Red till he was done there, so I could get a ride home. The teacher was a super religious Polish dude. When I walked in, we hung out and the teacher was tossing something up and down. I asked him what it was. He showed me a key. I made a joke to Red that it was the ghost key, but he actually looked at it and commented that it was the same size and color with a similar backing. We had the photo in the group chat, and he later pulled it up. The grooves matched perfectly, and the scuffs too. At this point, the Polish teacher asked what was happening, and Red told him. He was super pissy because it was a Catholic school, and hearing us with a Ouija board was basically like telling him that we loved Satan. I asked where he got it, because I thought Red gave it to him. He was dead serious, not joking anymore. It appeared to me. We kept asking what he meant, and he just kept saying, "It appeared to me." That freaked us out, and I told Red to come clean, assuming he asked the teacher to open the room to grab the key. Something I don't see him doing, but it was the only logical explanation. Red was more freaked out than me. The teacher lost his shit on us and wouldn't give it back to me. I wanted to dump it in holy water or something. Later that day, he went to his church and had the key blessed, burned, then buried. I got yelled at by 2 teachers, and Red no longer wanted to mess with Ouija boards or talk about anything like that. I put away the Ouija board and used it once since, but nothing ever happened again. On graduation day, I talked to him about it, and he alluded that something more happened. I asked what happened with the key, and he said something like, "Well, I took it in and the priest tried to burn it, blessed it, and rid it of evil, but..." And then, when I asked what the but was, he wouldn't tell me. Maybe he just slipped up. Maybe something happened. Red never admitted it, even though I don't know how he would, and Glenn was told about it after the key was burned. I don't know what happened, and won't claim it was definitely paranormal, but there is definitely no explanation I can come up with.